there's no free will.
I don't see. Okay, so do you believe that Halley's Comet, do you think its like orbital mechanics, its motion can be completely described by natural law, like the laws of physics?
You're saying a comet and its orbit?
Yeah.
You're saying that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it can.
Okay, cool. I think all physical objects are like that.
Okay.
Okay. Do you agree with that or disagree with that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Now, there are some things that are really complicated that we have very, very poor abilities to predict, like whether or not a hurricane is going to hit Louisiana 2 months from now. We can't, excuse me, we can't predict that with any type of accuracy at all because it's too complicated. But that being said, I wouldn't say that hurricanes are fundamentally random, indeterminate things. I think that because they are the product of physical forces and whatever else in our universe, I think that they actually are, or like the weather, the climate is deterministic. Would you agree with that or disagree with that?
The weather is deterministic. I thought what you were saying about the comet is like, um, if there's no other confounding variables, can we track whether it's going to keep going its orbit? I think that's true. I thought, is that what
Yes.
you're asking about the hurricane? Like, if
So
there's a
I'm
hurricane,
saying the hurricane is the same thing. It's just that there are too many variables for us to be able to predict it or describe it with any like accuracy. But that doesn't mean it's indeterminable. It just means we don't have like the computing power to do it. That's what I'm saying.
yeah, I agree. If there's no intervention, um, what? Okay, so where does this go from there, huh?
I think we are the exact same thing. So the deal with indeterminacy is that indeterminacy means it has that prior events mean absolutely nothing for the course of future events with respect to some particular thing. And I think that we are at the mercy of prior events. We are physical objects. It's all the same. Now, we're extremely complicated. We are, I should say, complex, I guess. But I don't think that our thoughts or actions are anything other than deterministic.
Uh, okay, I didn't get a. To me, it just sounded like a restatement of what you believe. I didn't really get an answer, but I think this question will get an answer. Do you think brain states are identical to mental states?
You could map them one to one. So in a way, yeah.
Well, it's not about whether we map them because, like, we can reduce things down to other things. Like, I can reduce a tree to a bundle of atoms, but
Yeah,
that
yeah. I'm saying you could
I don't
reduce a
think me and
mental
you.
state down to a brain state because the brain state. I
Yeah,
think
but
that
that
the brain
doesn't.
state fully explains the mental state.
I understand. Let me give you an example so we're not talking past each other, right? I can
Sure thing.
say a tree reduces down to a bundle of atoms, but a tree isn't identical to a bundle of atoms. Let me give you another example.
What
The
does that mean, though?
you know the distinction, between qualia and just like descriptive facts.
Qualitative versus
Like for example,
quantitative?
like no, no, not quantitative. Like qualia is like how a thing appears versus what it reduces to. So, like for example, if someone were completely blind, you can give them all the facts about what yellow is in a scientific sense, but they wouldn't have a knowledge of the qualitative experience of yellow or redness. Do you
Sure.
agree with that?
Uh,
Okay. So
well, they would
when I
have
say when you say
they would have an experience of it. They would have
well, they would have an
they would
understanding
have a
of the
mental map
scientific
of what
facts,
yellow
right?
is. They just wouldn't have the ability to imagine the color yellow.
Right. So, in one sense, they have the scientific facts about yellow, and then the other sense, they're missing the appearance. So, when me and you walk up to yellow and I say, that's yellow, am I referring to if saying that yellow's appearance is identical to the facts of yellow, then you're saying that by virtue of knowing what yellow is, I have access to the facts of yellow in the scientific sense. But that doesn't seem to be true, right?
I
Do you
have no
understand what
idea
I'm saying?
what you're trying to say. All I was saying was somebody who's blind could know everything
Do you understand what
scientifically
I'm saying?
about yellow except what it looks like. I
I
didn't say
understand.
that a scientific description of what yellow is the same thing as what it looks like. I never said that.
I understand that. I understand that what you are doing is reducing something to someone else. But what I'm saying is when we go up, me and you go up to yellow and we point at yellow and we say that's yellow, what yellow reduces to, which is going to be facts like whatever you want to say, waves or whatever, and whatever way you want to scientifically describe yellow, is is not identical to what I'm pointing to. Do you agree with that?
Perhaps seems
Okay.
reasonable.
Okay. So what is your reason for believing that because let's say obviously I don't think we're going to disagree that consciousness is going to be produced through some physicality, but what reason do you have to believe that consciousness is identical to the brain?
I never said that it was.
Okay, consciousness is not identical to the brain, then that means consciousness could have immaterial properties, and thus you have no reason to believe there's no free will.
Why would even having consciousness mean I have free will?
I didn't say that. I
Do
didn't
you
say it
think that
entails
consciousness
that.
has? Well, then why are you invoking it?
I didn't say it was an entailment. I said
Then why did you
you're
invoke it?
saying if you're saying there's no free will, let me explain, please, and I think we'll understand each other here. If you're saying that what we are reduces down to physicality, then what you're saying is that what we are is nothing more than what we reduce to. So what you're saying when you refer to me and your decisions, you're referring to psychological, physical facts about my brain. But what you just said that if when I point at yellow, that is not identical to the descriptive facts of yellowness in the scientific sense. So if I point to you and I say you made
No.
a
Well,
decision yesterday,
it
you'd
could
have
be.
to give a reason. Please try to understand what I'm saying. If me and you experience decisions, okay? We experience decisions just like me and you experience yellow and we don't experience wavelengths, okay? That means that the experience of yellow is not identical to the facts of it having wavelengths. It means you can't reduce yellow down to wavelengths in its appearance. When me and you experience free will and you say, "But I have evidence that that it's going to shut off if my brain shuts off," that doesn't go against having free will because you can be an agent which could be emergent off of some consciousness, just like the appearance of yellow is emergent off of the physical properties. That doesn't mean it's identical to it. So in order for you to say that we don't have free will, you would have to say that our decisions are identical to some physical state. And I'm asking you, what's your reason for believing that?
I don't think that's at all what you said earlier. So I asked you, what does consciousness have to do with? Actually, I don't even remember what I asked you. Something along the lines of you brought up consciousness, and you told me if brain states and consciousness aren't the same thing, then we have free will. How does that follow?
No, no, no. I never said then. I never said it was an entailment. I said that I said that if you believe that mental states are identical to brain states, you're going to have some justification. You're going to have to justify why that is. But earlier, it's what I took from what you were saying is that your justification is that we can reduce it down to some properties, just like yellow can be reduced down to wavelengths, but you admitted that
I think a
yellow isn't
person can
identical
look.
to
Okay,
wavelengths.
I never used consciousness. I don't really use consciousness as an arguing point for free will because I don't know what consciousness is. Now, if you're going to tell me that
But forget the word consciousness. Forget the word consciousness. Let's just use mental states and
seems like
brain
it's
state.
pretty important for okay, well, consciousness is a consequence of mental state, or it is mental states. I would say. So we're just not going to talk
You're
about
hyper
are we
focusing.
just not going to talk about consciousness at all? That's fine with me.
What whenever a word gets super fixated on and I feel like it diverts, I feel like it's better to get rid of the word and talk in other terms so that we can understand each other. So like when I say I
Okay.
love ice cream, you're saying that's identical to some descriptive fact of my brain. That's what you're saying, right? Or am I
You could
mistaken?
So, in a sense, I could artificially invoke a memory in you by doing a perfect one-to-one neural mapping of what triggers that memory. We would have a one-to-one correspondence for those two things. They're completely translatable. Now, does that mean that they are the exact same thing? Well, I don't even know what consciousness is, so I'm not trying to argue anything about like consciousness in here. But even if they're not the same thing, in order to even have a point, I think you'd have to somehow, well, you'd have to provide evidence that consciousness changes brain states rather than the other way around. Brain states
I'm trying to get away from this word. I'm trying to get away from that word, but
sure. So
look,
like
I'm gonna try to make this
mental
distinction.
processes or mental states somehow change brain states rather than the other way around.
I understand, but I'm trying to get you to understand what I'm saying first, and then we can go from there. If
That
you
yellow
understand
is
what I
not
mean
the
when I
same
say
thing as perceiving yellow. I don't see how that's an argument for anything
no, 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 no,
other than
no,
we don't know what consciousness is.
no, 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 no. What I'm saying is that when we talk about something, we're not talking about what it reduces to. That's what I'm saying. That they're not
What
identical.
does
So
this have
when
to
we
do with
talk,
free will?
because when we talk about decisions, and you think that a person making decisions can reduce down to a brain, that doesn't deny that there are decisions being made. That's not
By
a
the
defeater.
brain.
No, okay. That what you're saying with your consistency, following your consistency, is that what something is identical to what it reduces to.
I really do, it could be that I'm an idiot, but I genuinely have no idea where you get the idea that that follows at all.
Okay.
So if
Okay, does
there's evidence,
can an
look,
atom
I don't.
can I
This is
here,
okay.
I
Look,
promise
I'm
I'll
annoyed
put it
because
simple.
I don't care
I
about
promise.
philosophy and the imaginary world of ideas where nothing ever happens. These logical arguments are interesting, but they produce zero results ever. You're not giving me evidence of anything. So what evidence do you
I'm trying to get you to
have
understand.
of free will
Fabian,
at all?
I'm trying to get you to understand something.
Just
And you're not.
pretend that I'm incapable. So pretend that I'm incapable of understanding what you're trying to argue for. Pretend that I'm too stupid to get it. I need you to show me. Give me any evidence that there's
Well,
some sort of
first,
intervening thing that is indeterminate when it comes to conscious agents.
so first of all, I didn't come up here to prove to you free will is a thing. I came up to you to demonstrate that you have no reason to believe that there is no free will.
Why?
I was going through it before you asked me that question.
Okay.
So just be let me I think a good example to give is like an atom. An atom can't have sex, right? Do you agree?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay. Uh, but if we arrange atoms in a certain way, it can produce such a thing which emerges from atoms, such a thing as a human, which then can have sex. So a human has different properties from that which it reduces to, right?
If you're sure, I don't really know what the point is. If you're trying to analyze sexual reproduction between two biological organisms at the level of atoms, then it makes absolutely no sense to even talk about sexual reproduction. Because what you're talking about is moving some
No,
atoms from here to here, and then those atoms being part of a self-contained system.
no.
Well, it's not really self-contained, but well, it can
Try,
be a self-contained
try,
open system.
try to understand what I'm saying. Try to understand what I'm saying. I'm saying some entity has some property. Atoms have certain properties, but the properties that humans have are not
This,
identical to the properties atoms have, even though humans are emergent from atoms.
yeah, I'm
Does that
aware
make
of.
sense?
Yes, I know.
Okay, so just because our experience of free will emerges from some physical activity, that doesn't mean that what it emerges from is what it is, and that doesn't mean that our experience doesn't have different properties from what it emerges from. Does that make sense?
Sure. Do you have any evidence
Okay, okay. Evidence of what? I'm getting
of
you
free
to
will?
agree. I'm getting I'm giving you to agree that you have no reason to believe that free will does not exist because your earlier
Do you
reason
have
for
a reason to
believing
believe that
is
free
that you
will
can,
does exist?
yes, our experience.
Okay, go on. Well, actually, before we do that,
Yeah,
you agreed.
I
So
experience free
I
will.
asked you earlier. Do physical object like when I brought up Halley's Comet, I said physical objects are at the mercy of the deterministic laws of physics, and you agreed with that. I'm a physical object. Now I can have a conscious experience, but that doesn't mean that I'm not a physical object. This conscious experience, if you ask me, is a product of my physical self.
A product of. Yes, you see what you said, a product of? Humans are a
Yes.
product of
Okay.
atoms, but that
Before
doesn't mean that humans don't have different properties than
you're
atoms.
not arguing for free will. At no point is free will being brought into here. I
You're
think
not
that our mental
understanding
states come
the
from
connection
brain
to God.
activity. That doesn't mean that
That could be
therefore free
true.
will anywhere. Because earlier when I
Listen,
said, do you have any evidence that mental states or
that
consciousness
you're
causes brain states to change rather than the other way around? And you completely ran away from that argument and asked you to bring evidence, and you haven't brought any evidence. You're just saying you're not justified in it, except you agreed with the basic premises behind this. So, like, do you actually
listen to what you
have
just
any
said.
evidence?
Listen to what you just said. You said what I am is a product, which means humans are also emergent. They're products of atoms. That doesn't mean that the properties of a human are identical to the properties of atoms. So when we point to each other and we have this experiential understanding of
What
what it means to be a
evidence do you
self,
have that
that
we have
doesn't.
free will?
Are you listening, or are you just
Are
trying
you going
to
to answer the question? You're not even trying to answer the question.
first? I answered this when you asked me it the first time. I came up to ask you about there's no free will, your position, and now you're just trying to shift the burden of proof on me because you can't justify your position.
You agree that physical objects are at the mercy of the deterministic laws of nature. That is what we are.
No, well, nope, I disagree with you there.
You don't think that a human being is a collection of atoms.
I think you are not justified in saying that what we are is identical to what it reduces to, because that's what
Is
you
it
said.
yes or no? A human is made of a collection of atoms.
Yes, that is true.
Okay, what else are you adding to this?
I'm saying that a human has a brain, and a brain, in my
Yep.
experience, seems to produce this thing that's called intentional states when we refer to our likings, what we
The
desire,
brain
our
produces it.
sentiments.
The brain is a
Yes, I
physical
agree.
object at the
I
mercy of.
agree.
Okay, then where's the free will?
Okay, if you're tracking here, you'd notice that
I am.
the atom, just because humans are composed of atoms, that doesn't mean that the human has the same properties of atoms.
That
Just
is
as the
that is
brain
fucking great. If I burn a
listen,
candle, it produces a flame. The flame is not
listen.
the candle itself.
Okay.
But is the flame its own free agent choosing to exist? No. These mental states and consciousness or whatever are not the same thing as the person, but they are the product. They come from brain states, unless you think that that's not accurate. It doesn't matter if our mental
Okay, that
states
doesn't mean
are
they're
the same
determined.
thing as what we are. That's not free
Okay,
will.
I agree
And
with
that's
you.
not evidence
No,
of
I
free
agree
will.
with you. I agree
So
with you.
what's the
Please stop trying to
point?
listen, please, you have to listen. Arguments build up. Reasons for believing something are usually they build up, right? So if you're saying
But
what
do
we
they go
are,
anywhere?
you're saying if what we are reduces to physical states, what reason do you have to believe that that what we are doesn't have the property of intentionality and of choice?
What does that mean? I have a so I have a are you telling me that I have no reason to think that my conscious experience is is deterministic? What evidence do I
I'm
have that my
asking,
conscious experience is indeterminable?
please. Okay, I'll repeat my question in a different way. If you
Go for it.
said atoms don't have to have the same properties as humans, brains don't have to have the same properties as humans, that means that what me and you are, I agree with you. It does reduce to a brain. It can't work without a brain. The brain produces it. But what reason do you have to believe that what we are is has the same properties that the brain has in being deterministic? What reason do you have to believe that?
Because what we are seems pretty clear to be an emergent property of our physical brains, which are determined, which do have to follow.
That didn't answer my question.
Yes, it did. You either don't know what you're trying to
human,
ask, or you're not understanding what I'm saying at this point. Like when I gave the candle analogy earlier.
Please listen.
This is ridiculous.
You admitted that entities don't have to have the same properties as what they're produced from. So
yeah, but if the properties are the product of the physical things which have to obey determinism, then there's no room to assert that therefore the products of these things have free agency.
No,
that makes no sense.
That's a claim. What's your argument for that?
My argument for what?
You said just because something is emergent off of something physical, which is determined, therefore what's emergent is determined. What's your argument for that?
Cause and effect.
That's not an argument. An argument is a set of premises and a conclusion. What's your argument?
The argument is it's right there in and of itself. So
that's a claim. What's the argument?
So, do you think that our mental states come from our brain states?
What's your argument for believing?
This is the argument. Do you think our mental states come from our brain states?
Look, an argument isn't a dialectical process. You don't need to ask me questions in order to form your argument, because an argument is a standalone set of premises and a conclusion. Some reasons for you believing something in a valid inference rule. You don't need to ask me questions in order to form your own belief on what you believe. I'm asking you, just because what we are is emergent off of something physical, what is your argument for believing that therefore it must follow the same properties? It must have some of the same properties that it's emergent from. What's your argument for that?
I didn't say it has to have the same properties of it, unless we're saying that determinism is the property. Okay. If our brain states are what are causing our mental states, and the brain states follow determinism, then how are they producing something indeterminable? That doesn't make any sense.
No, I'm asking you, what's your argument?
That is the argument. What are you talking about?
That's not an argument. That's a question. That's not an argument. A question isn't an argument.
Okay.
If I say
the brain states are, then just reword it so it's not a question. The brain states are at the mercy of determinism. The brain states produce these mental states. Therefore,
what's your reason for believing that?
What? A equals B, B equals C, A equals C. There, go with that.
No, that's not a monus ponens. That's not an argument. That's not an argument.
Remember when I said earlier, in the imaginary land of ideas where nothing ever happens and no questions ever get answered, that bores me and it's stupid and frustrating. Pretend that you're completely right. I don't know. I can't even form an argument. I have nothing at all. What I've done is actually describe things the way they appear to be. I've asked you for evidence, and so what evidence do you actually have? Not just an argument, but evidence. In the real world where we try to actually do things, I'm way more interested in evidence.
Is this a pivot of the burden of proof? And are you saying that you can't
just assume that it is? Go ahead and just expose me as much as you want by producing evidence. Because if you can't produce any evidence, then I don't care.
By evidence, do you mean reason to believe something?
I mean, I don't mean pure reason, pure logical arguments. I mean evidence. I can tell you all about brains and how we can read brain waves and how we've done experiments that can predict people's thoughts and decisions in the future. I mean like actual empirical evidence. Do you have any?
By evidence, you mean an empirical form of
yeah, I mean like good evidence, not, again, for the millionth time, just a logical argument.
What's your reason for believing that empirical
evidence do you have? What evidence do you have?
Well, your term evidence is loaded. That's what I'm trying to understand.
Empirical evidence. What empirical evidence do you have?
My everyday experience is an empirical evidence. everyone's
Go
everyday
on. Okay,
experience.
my everyday experience is empirical evidence that my claim is true. There. Okay, so there.
Okay, wait, let's examine this. Let's examine our experiences
Just
together.
give me the evidence.
It,
No, you can't.
are,
Okay, that's
are we going through this or no?
yeah. Give me the evidence.
And by evidence, you meant an empirical form of justification. I just did. An experience is a form of empirical justification. Empirical just means through experience.
Who has access to that other than you?
An empirical form of justification? Everyone?
No, you said your experience is your empirical evidence. Who has access to that?
Who has access to my mental states? Me.
Yeah.
That's a pretty obvious
Anybody
question.
else? Anybody else?
Who does anyone else have access to my mental states unless
Yeah.
I tell them?
You can tell me about them, but you could lie. I could tell you I'm thinking about you in women's underwear right now, but I'm actually not. I'm thinking about me in women's underwear right now. Or maybe I was
You're
thinking
adding
of
a
neither of
stipulation
them.
with me lying.
You cannot do anything with that information. So your conscious experience is inaccessible to any outside party, and so it is epistemologically
saying
worthless.
Yeah, you don't know what epistemology is then. You don't
It's
know what epistemology
epistemologically worthless to anybody else.
is? No, that's false. The way we relate to objects
Okay,
in the world
okay, ready? A magical super cosmic being just divinely revealed to me that you're wrong about everything. There, I have greatly increased I have increased knowledge. I have created a brand new paradigm of epistemology. Now, nobody else has access to this information because it was specially revealed to me. But it is epistemologically valuable. Even though I'm the only one that can even know whether or not it's true or not.
I'm trying to get you to relate to your experiences and
Trying to get you to give me usable evidence.
And by usable evidence, you mean what?
I mean something other than what goes on in your mind, which is inaccessible to anybody else, as admitted to by you. So do you have that?
No, you're being dishonest. So when something
that's great. You can say that if you want. Give me evidence that is accessible to some other party.
Stop talking for 10 seconds and I'll be able to answer your question.
No, because you're just a weaselly little guy and you haven't answered anything.
No, you have
Give
no
me
idea
evidence.
what you're saying.
That's fine. Assume I don't know what I'm saying, but I'm asking you for evidence. Okay. Give me evidence.
How am I going to answer your question if you keep muting me? How am I going to answer your question?
Because you're not answering the question or trying to answer the question.
Here's
Go
my
ahead.
evidence. Listen. Just because I experience the moon doesn't mean that there isn't a moon, right?
Give me evidence, not some dumbass fucking prose about the fucking moon. Give me evidence. Give me evidence, not some stupid logical argument or prose about the moon. Because you're not engaging. So give me evidence.
So you want me to answer you and you want to mute?
I want you to give me evidence.
I did give you evidence.
The moon?
A deductive argument. You didn't accept it. So
no, empirical evidence.
Yeah, empirical means experiential, which means you're asking me an experiential form of justification. Do you understand what your own terms mean?
Yes. Okay, so give me, like I said earlier, I assumed that you knew what I meant by that. So empirical, again, I can simply claim I had an experience from a magical wizard that told me you're wrong about everything. And apparently that's empirical evidence. But it's actually completely useless. Do you agree that information is useless?
You're not disagreeing that a seeming is a form of justification. You're disagreeing about the truth value of the proposition. You're saying that it's false. You're not saying whether the justification is wrong or not. You're making a category error. Do you know what a category error is?
Just assume that I'm wrong about everything. What I'm asking for is empirical evidence that isn't just your mental state for this free will thing. I asked you for empirical evidence. You said my brain states or your experience or something like that. I said I don't consider that good enough. Now, go ahead and think that I'm being unfair or whatever. But can you produce anything else other than that?
You're asking me for empirical evidence, which is an experiential reason. And you said you deny experience because it reduces to my mental states. But
can you produce anything else other than You claimed that you have a particular mental experience. Can you produce anything other than that? Yes or no?
If you stop muting me, I'll be able to explain this for you very simply.
If you
You're
don't
asking
say
me,
yes or no, I'm going to continue to mute you. Can you produce anything else?
don't get upset.
Can you produce anything else?
I can explain this to you very simply.
No, you can explain after you answer yes or no.
Well, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yes or no. This is how many chances you have left. Yes or no.
So you're asking me for empirical evidence? Yes, I have empirical evidence.
Okay.
But empirical evidence
Other
is
than
experiential. So you're asking me for empirical evidence other than experiences when the definition of empirical evidence
empirical
is
evidence could be something other than what only goes on in your brain. If there's a red apple, if there's an apple on the table, if there's an apple on the table, and I ask you, what color do you think it is? And you say red, I have the apple that I can actually refer to see whether or not what you're saying makes any good sense to me.
So
But it kind of sounds like, holy shit, it kind of sounds like what you're saying is, no, something that only exists in your mind is your evidence. That is useless information to third parties.
You don't know what you're talking about. You're making a
And you're Jesus fucking Christ. I can't anymore.